Okay, seeing no other public comment, we will. Oh, okay.
Well, I just want to introduce myself to the board. My name is Martin Fusick. I grew up here in McKinleyville. Was part of a group of teenagers that started trying to get a skate park in the late 90s, and just recently linked up with Charlie, and I'm just going to be here. We're really pushing to try to get this done. I mean, I just turned 40, and I'm hoping to skate it before, get any older. So we're really pushing to do a phase one, and we're working with 2 different contractors that could potentially do it. And we're just really, we're fired up, and the community is fired up, and just want to let you guys know we're going to be pushing for getting it done. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. I think all the board is probably excited to see progress too. Yeah. Jump in there and say that. The rest of somebody disagree. Pretty sure we're all looking forward to progress. All right, let's do the consent calendar. Consent calendars are expected to be routine and non-controversial, be acted upon by the board of directors at one time without discussion. If any board member, staff member, or interested person requests that an item be removed from the consent calendar, it shall be removed so that it may be acted upon separately. Anyone have any consent calendar items they want to review?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second that.
Thank you.
Director Bender?
Aye.
Director Clark Peterson? Aye. Director Mayo?
Yes.
Director Orsini?
Yes.
President Couch?
Yes.
So one thing that I would like to ask, it's a question. I didn't want to pull it, but I had a question for staff.
Go ahead.
Related to the updating of the water and the sewer installation fees. I see they've gone up. They went up considerably. Typically, we used to do that like every year. We would look at those numbers during budget, and then we would decide whether or not. So they went up quite a bit. Was that because of just how much things have gone up, or was that because we haven't done it for so many years?
So materials have gone way up.
Sure. Yeah, pipe's 300% more than it was.
We were hoping they would come back down a little bit, and they're not coming down.
Okay. So is that why we held off on it? Okay. Yeah, because I know pipe and fittings are over 300%.
Yeah, they jumped big last year, right? After they got shipping done with, people got to work, they come back down. We were planning on coming back down.
No, because oil. I mean, that plastic's made with oil. It's not going to go down.
I also want to talk to someone. Item D5, considering attendance at the Aquafall conference and a fiscal analysis. She has only 2 nights of lodging budgeted when it should be 3. However, I don't think that fits within the title and recommendation of the item, as it's just an estimate.
Okay. She budgeted in the fiscal analysis, she budgeted 2 nights rather than 3 of lodging, when it should be 3, Monday through Wednesday. I didn't know how accurate this language needed to be. You got it?
This is more or less just to approve, give the board approval to travel the expenses over expenses.
That's what I surmised.
Yeah. But we have to make, we have to do board action to back up the board being able to travel in case something happens.
Understood.
Okay. We make a motion to the consent calendar?
We already did.
Okay,
We
that's right. We
already
talked about
passed
it
it.
afterwards.
Yeah,
we talked about it after.
I got confused there with my. All right, continued and new business.
We already did.
We did.
We did.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remembered that. Then these guys said, oh, well, by the way. That's all right. Got me off my path.
We're working it, by the end of the meeting, we will be.
Everyone will be confused. So we'll go to continued and new business. E1 is water and sewer rates, evaluation and proposal, 2018 notice of public hearing. Pat.
Yep, and hopefully everyone can hear me. Chris Fisher from Wildan is also on to, and I'll hand it off to him shortly and let him run through his presentation, but I'm going to do an introduction. The district is considering an adjustment to the existing water and sewer rates to adequately fund operations, maintenance, and present and future capital costs. Because of Proposition 218, rate analysis must be conducted every 5 years if incremental rate adjustments are to be carried out. The district's last rate study was conducted in 2018. The district has experienced inflationary increases in ongoing operation and maintenance costs, and also needs to ensure adequate financial resources to address projects in the capital improvement plan, including the 4.5 million gallon water storage tank, the Highway 101 sewer main crossing replacements, the Central Avenue water and sewer main rehabs, etc. MCSD has adjusted water and sewer rates based only on financial needs related to the operation and maintenance of water distribution and sewer facilities and activities necessary for providing safe and reliable drinking water to our customers. District staff and our consultant are tasked with ensuring that any recommended rate adjustments would provide the necessary revenue and be reasonable, defensible, and fair to our residents and ratepayers. We must also follow the Proposition 218 process that is outlined in the California State Constitution and Government Code for any adjustments in utility rates. The Prop 218 establishes certain procedural requirements for adopting rate adjustments, which include noticing requirements for any new or adjustment of fees or charges. The district must mail a notice of proposed rates and public hearing to all affected property owners, and or tenants who are directly liable for the payments for these services. The notice must specify the new rates, the basis of their calculation, the reason for the rates, and date, time, and location of the public rate hearing at which the proposed rates will be considered for adoption. And attachment 3 to your board packets is the notice. We also must conduct a public hearing. The district must hold a public hearing prior to adopting the proposed rate adjustments. The public hearing must be held not less than 45 days after the required notices are mailed. Any interested parties will be provided an opportunity to provide comments at the public hearing. And staff is proposing we hold a public hearing at our November 2nd regular board meeting. Rate adjustments are subject to majority protest. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the proposed rate adjustments are subject to a majority protest. Following the public hearing, all valid written protests received up until that point will be tabulated. If more than 50% of affected property owners or customers submit written protests against the proposed rate adjustments, the adjustment cannot be adopted by the board. If there have been less than 50% submitted, the board will then have the option of implementing the new rates. Prop 218 also establishes several substantive requirements that are deemed to apply to utility service charges, including the cost of service. So revenues derived from the fee or charge cannot exceed the funds required to provide the service. Intended purpose, revenues derived from the fee or charge can only be used for the purpose for which the fee was imposed. And you hear me frequently saying we can only spend water and sewer fees or funds on water and sewer projects. Proportional cost recovery, the amount of the fee or charge levied on any customer shall not exceed the proportional cost of service attributed to that customer. Prop 218 requires that the district ensure that its water and sewer rates reasonably reflect the proportional cost of providing service to each customer. Consistent with this law, it is appropriate for rates to recover costs for operation, capital needs, debt service, administration, as well as costs related to prudent long-term operational or financial management of utilities, such as maintaining adequate fund reserves and planning for contingencies. The comprehensive utility rate study developed by Wildan Financial Services, which is included as attachment 1 in your board packet, is based on a comprehensive review and analysis of the district's operations, reserves, and CIP. The preliminary results presented here include 5 years of cost of service-based rates, which, if implemented, will provide sufficient revenue to finance the ongoing and anticipated capital projects, provide funding for the existing and future operations and maintenance expenditures associated with water and sewer services, and allow for accumulation of prudent reserves. So I'll hand it off to Chris and let him run through his presentation of the rate study that they did.
Thank you, Pat. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So thank you, Pat, and members of the board. I'm Chris Fisher with Wildan Financial Services, and it's a privilege to be with you and have an opportunity to work with the district on this rate study. So I'm going to provide an overview of the process that we've been through, the analysis, the results of that analysis, and then we'll wrap up with the next steps, and then of course have time for any discussion or questions. And Joey, I was told you're going to advance slides for me, so go ahead and go to the first slide. So the primary goals and objectives here of the rate study, and really any rate study, is ultimately you want to be sure that you can recover all of the costs that are required for you to operate both the water and wastewater utility. So you know, we go through a process of identifying all those costs and then allocating those out so that they're recovered from customers in a manner that complies with Prop 218. We want the rates to be based on those costs of service, again, as required under Prop 218. They should be equitable among the different customers and also within certain customer classes. For instance, residential, where there's tiered rates based on different levels of consumption. We want those rates to be equitable within that customer class as well. They should be relatively efficient and feasible to administer for staff at the district. We don't want, and for customers to understand, we don't want, you know, a complicated structure that doesn't make sense to anybody. We want people to understand what they're going to pay and ultimately to be able to understand how their bills are calculated. The rate study is based on a 5-year financial plan. And again, as Pat went over a lot of the details of Prop 218, both the substantive requirements of Prop 218, meaning the way that we develop cost-based rates, and that those rates are only being used to finance costs specifically for the utilities and no other costs, and that the rates that customers pay ultimately are based on their proportionate share of the costs. And then we'll also follow the procedural elements of Prop 218, which is, Pat went over conducting a public hearing, mailing out a notice of that public hearing, allowing a process for tabulation of protests, and the ability for the public to provide testimony and participate in the public hearing. So all of those are the primary objectives of the rate study. Go ahead. So here's an overview of sort of the analytical process that we go through, and I'll go through it kind of in 2 halves. The green shapes, I guess, boxes, various shapes and things up top, then the red ones at the bottom. So the first part of the process is to collect historical customer data, which tells us, you know, who all the customers are, their consumption habits, you know, when they demand service and when that drives peak demand on the system. We work through all of that and do what we call a revenue reconciliation analysis, which is to calculate the revenues that can be generated based on the existing rate structure. And then we compare that revenue that can be generated under existing rates to the total revenue requirement. That's the red boxes at the bottom. And that's made up of a thorough review and discussion and breakdown of the budget, so that we can understand all the operating and maintenance costs, costs for any outstanding debt. There's one issue that the district is making debt service payments on. And then the cost of capital projects and equipment and other expenditures like that. So we compare that total revenue requirement to the revenue that can be generated under existing rates, and to the extent there is any, and we'll see as we move on here that there is some other revenue. If there's a gap, then if there's an adjustment necessary in revenue, we'll identify that and then proceed to the rate design phase. So that's just an overview of the methodology. We'll go to the next slide. So some of the factors driving the specific financial plan we developed for McKinleyville CSD. So just like everything else we're reading about these days, you know, costs are going up, and that includes things like operating costs, equipment and supplies, cost of maintaining the system, and replacing, routine component replacements and all those types of things it takes to keep the system up and running and operating at peak condition, including personnel costs, the labor and benefits, all those things associated with staff at the district. And then the third item, and probably more significantly in this case, is planned capital expenditures. The district has a number of projects scheduled over the next 10 years. We're focused more on the immediate 5 years right now because that's the timeline for which we can recommend adjustments and rates. And so, but we took a look, as we'll see in some of the subsequent slides here, at the 10-year picture, so that we can understand, what the district's going to be anticipating at the end of this 5-year cycle, to have, the best preparation and planning possible to transition into that. So there's just the three major projects are the water storage tank, the Highway 101 sewer main crossings, and the Central Avenue water and sewer main rehabilitation projects. Next slide, please. So this shows kind of a graphic representation of the capital plan for the district over the next 10 years. As I mentioned, we're focused more on the next 5 years, and you can see the first bullet there. There's currently a little over $40 million in capital projects planned for the next 5 years. And those are a little bit in favor of water, about 54% water projects and 45%, close to 46% are sewer projects. And then in the subsequent 5 years, beginning in 2028 on out to the end of the 10-year projection period, you see that capital drops almost in half, about 24 million. And then the mix of that flips and is now predominantly sewer. 77% of that is sewer with 22% water. That's just an overview of the capital projects that the district has planned over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So the first thing, as I mentioned when I went over that overall rate methodology, is to understand the current state of the financial plan and financial condition for both utilities. So we want to understand, what do the projections look like under existing rates, what we call the status quo scenario. And then review that, compare that to the required revenue, and identify and understand any shortfalls that might be there, and that might require us to calculate an adjustment in revenue. Next slide, please. So here's a screenshot that, and we'll look at the same shot for sewer, so I'll describe it, that identifies the primary three financial drivers, if you will, of really any rate study. And that's the overall projected operating results. In other words, are your revenues covering your expenditures? The days cash on hand, and this can be driven by a number of factors. In this case, the board has specific policies to maintain certain levels of cash. And then debt service coverage. So if there is outstanding debt, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, there is one debt issue outstanding. The lenders of that debt, in this case the bondholders, will require the district to maintain a certain level of debt service coverage. And what that means is that, and in this case it's 1.25, the ratio is 1.25. And what that means is that you have to have net revenue, meaning after you subtract your expenditures from your revenue, the net result that remains has to be at least 1.25 times the annual debt service. So for every dollar of debt service that you have to pay, you have to have $1.25 in net revenue to ensure that there's adequate coverage there, and that the lenders or the bondholders that the district borrow money from can be assured they're going to get their payments. So these are the main three metrics, and we'll talk about them for both sewer and water. So you see on the top, the projected operating results, not too bad a picture, a little bit of a decline there in the net results. The light blue bars represent the revenue. The darker blue bars represent the expenditures, and you can see in all years the revenues exceed the expenditures, but there is just a slight declining trend. We start in year 2023 with just under $1 million net result. By the year 2027, we're down to about $500,000. So not a trend you want to allow to continue for very long. In the bottom left, the days cash on hand, you can see that's definitely a much more serious looking situation. You can see beginning in the first year, the days cash on hand is well above the 365-day target. That's what that black line represents. You see it's at 365 days. So the district is maintaining in its reserve essentially a full year's operating cost, which allows it to maintain flexibility for timing and receipts of revenue from customers, and the timing and payments that are due for various things, and keep cash in reserve for emergencies and anything unexpected. So you can see after that first year, the balance drops below that threshold and then continues down to where it's, you know, under 50 days by the end of the projection period in year 2027. The debt service does go down some, but still well above the required 1.25 times there by year 2027. So the days cash on hand is what we'll talk about, as that was the driver for the most part of the results here. So next slide, please. So as promised, here's the same graphic, but now measuring the projections and the metrics for the sewer utility. So you can see the top looks very similar. The light blue revenue bars exceeding the dark blue expenditure bars throughout the whole period. And the net result is going down just slightly. It's not quite as much of a decline as the water utility, but still going down just a little bit. The debt service coverage, I'll go to that first, the bottom right, you can see, you know, maintains, you know, well above the 1.25 all the way through, and not much decline there at all. But again, the cash balance on the bottom left, you can see starts out very strong, but then declines and continues to decline below the policy level. You know, you can see out through the end period there, again, down below 50 days. So again, not a situation we want to allow to persist. So next slide, please. So now that we, you know, have identified that, you know, the revenue, you know, without an adjustment, the revenue continues to decline, we need to do something about that. So now we identify that total revenue requirement. We develop a cost of service methodology, and we're going to walk through that, and we're going to talk about how costs are allocated between various categories, and I'll talk a little bit more about those categories, and then finally how they're allocated to each customer class, and then how that will ultimately help us develop the rates and ensure that the rates are based on those costs of service and that they follow the requirements of Prop 218 and also are consistent with industry standards. So let's go to the next slide. So let's revisit the methodology, kind of focusing in on the steps here. So again, phase one, we talk about identifying how much revenue is needed. I mentioned that in one of the earlier slides. You know, examining all the budget information and the capital plan and all of those things, and ultimately results in an analysis that tells us are the utilities collecting sufficient revenue to meet all the needs. And the purpose of this analysis is to help us develop a financial plan that allows us to look forward for the next 5 years and then on out past that out to 10 years, so we can understand the financial health of the utility throughout that 10-year period. The second phase is to identify who's incurring the costs. In other words, which customers of the systems are causing the systems to have to, you know, incur costs and construct infrastructure, maintain infrastructure. And that results in a cost of service analysis. And the goal of that is to assign those costs out to ensure equity amongst customer classes and comply with the Prop 218 requirements that rates be based on the proportionate cost of service. And then finally, the third question we need to address is, what do the rates need to be? And that's the analysis that we go through there is called rate design, and that's to figure out, you know, between the fixed rates and the volumetric rates, which we'll talk about in more detail, what do those need to be based on the cost of service analysis in order to assign rates to customers based on their usage and how they benefit from the system. So the outcome of this whole process is to ensure that we have rates that are Prop 218 compliant, that they generate sufficient revenue to cover the cost of providing service to customers, and that those rates are, again, both cost of service compliant and equitable. Next slide, please. So phase one, that was the revenue requirements I just described. So the first thing is to understand that there is a difference. We'll talk about revenue adjustments versus rate adjustments. And they're not the same. The process we go through of identifying the revenue requirement is identifying the aggregate amount of revenue for the utility as a whole, and we do this separately each for water and wastewater. The total amount of money that's required for the utility to do everything it needs to do from a financial standpoint. So the money that's required to fund operations and maintenance and pay for personnel and electricity, all the costs that are incurred to operate the utility and provide service to customers. So that's a total figure. You know, if we need to generate, you know, X number of dollars, that's total across the system, that's total revenue. Rates are the rates that are charged to customers. And in the first year, those may not be exactly the same as the revenue adjustment because the rates have to be based on the cost of service. And so to the degree that certain customers should pay a higher proportionate share because the cost of service analysis tells us that they are incurring more costs, then those rates will reflect that. So again, an X% change in required revenue doesn't necessarily result in the same percent change in the rate adjustment in the first year. After the first year, they will be the same because at that point the adjustments go in lockstep. We only have to do that cost of service analysis for the first year, and once that cost of service analysis is complete, then it stays put for the 5 years, and then any adjustments between rates and revenue will be the same after that first year. So those rates are broken down into a base charge. That's also sometimes called a fixed charge or a fixed rate, and is based on the size of the meters. And then the usage charge are based on the volume of consumption. We'll talk in more detail about these as we move along here. Next slide, please. So here, based on the analysis, the revenue requirements analysis that we did, again, looking at all the costs of the utility and comparing that to the revenues that could be generated based on the current rates, it was determined and calculated that the water utility needed to have an adjustment revenue of 6% for the first 3 years, 2023, 24, and 25, and then a 5% adjustment for 2026 and again in 2027. And the sewer utility requires a 4% adjustment in the first 2 years and then 5% the subsequent 3 years. And so those again are the aggregate revenue adjustments. In other words, the utility needs to generate that much more in revenue as we move through the 5-year projection period. Next, please. So here is a table showing the required revenue broken out for both water and wastewater. And you can see the top line there, total operation and maintenance costs, about 3.4 million for water, 2.4 for wastewater. Debt service for each of the utilities, about 455,000 for water, a little over $1 million for wastewater. Other expenditures and transfers results in a gross revenue requirement. That is offset by other revenue that's available, property tax revenue primarily, and results in a net revenue requirement of 4.37 million for water and 4.27 million for wastewater. So that is what we call the revenue requirement. That's the amount of aggregate revenue that needs to be generated for each of those 2 utilities to have financial sufficiency to pay all the bills. And that revenue is then generated by rates. And now we'll talk about the next steps here. On the next slide, please. So then that next step is the cost of service analysis. So again, I mentioned we use an industry standard approach. It's called the base. I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, go back to that last slide, please. I needed to.
Oh, sure.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, the next step is phase 2, which is the cost of service analysis. So as I mentioned earlier, we use a standard industry standard approach called the base extra capacity approach, and that essentially is a way of allocating costs out to customers in a fashion that reflects their base demand as well as their peak demand during peak periods, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and is also compliant with Prop 218 and the requirement that the rates be cost of service based. It does recognize that different customers place different demands on both the water and wastewater systems based on the time of day and the degree to which they peak demand at certain times of the day and times of the year. And then costs are allocated based on whether they're fixed or variable. They're allocated based on the number of customers within each customer class, as well as the total customers overall, and the total flows within each customer class, and the peak demand by customer class. Next slide, please. So the first step of this cost of service analysis is to take all of the costs that make up the budget, that make up the revenue requirement, and we're talking about water now, and we go through a process called functional unbundling. So we break those costs out, essentially just allocate those to different buckets and things like supply, transmission, distribution, and on down there. Customer costs are, customer service and billing, and then, back office administrative costs. And then further classify those costs as to whether they're necessary to meet base demand, whether they're necessary to meet max day extra capacity, max hour extra capacity, or whether they're attributable just strictly to customer cost on the basis of the number of accounts and the number of equivalent units. Next, please. On the sewer side, that functional unbundling, again, is the first step. It's just that those functional categories are a little bit different for sewer. You're not don't have transmission distribution, you have collection, and you have treatment and pumping and customer costs. And then those are allocated on the basis of system volume and system capacity, and then also on the strength components that different customers, that reflects the fact that different customers generate discharge that requires different levels of treatment and the associated costs, and then into the customer group. And those are how the sewer costs are allocated out. Next, please. So here is the proposed test year utility rates and comparison of bills. Go ahead to the next slide. So here are the water rates first. So you can see the fixed charges, or the meter charges, are the top part of the chart here. They start with a 5/8 inch meter and then progress up to an 8-inch meter. Again, this is based on AWWA standards that demonstrate that the amount of capacity that different meters, I should back it up, kind of tripped over that one, but the different meters, different size meters can accommodate different levels of flow, and that costs should be allocated based on the fact that if you have a 3-inch meter compared to a 5-inch meter, you can demand significantly more flow, and that cost should be reflective of that. So you can see, for instance, the 5/8 meter, standard residential meter, the monthly base charge is $20.45. A 3-inch would be $242.81. So that is reflective of the fact that the potential demand for someone with a larger meter dictates that they bear a larger portion of the cost. Then at the bottom part of the chart there, you see the volumetric rates. That's another word for consumption rates. That's the rate based on the amount of actual water that customers consume. For the first 800 cubic feet of water, sometimes also called a unit, 100 cubic feet is a unit, that's 748 gallons. So for the first 800 cubic feet of water, customers pay $2.47. Once they go over that 800 cubic feet limit, the all water consumption above that 800 amount is $3.32 per 100 cubic feet. And then in addition to that, there's a Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District pass-through. That is not determined by McKinleyville CSD. It wasn't determined by us. That's just what the wholesale rate that Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District determines on an annual basis. That's just passed straight through on the bill, just so that since the district doesn't control that, it just gets passed through and added to the bill. So customers pay that $1.76 per 100 cubic feet of water based on that flow from Humboldt Bay. So that's the water rates. Let's go to the next slide, please. So in addition, one of the tasks that we completed as part of the water rate analysis was to develop a drought surcharge, or a drought rate. Now, this will be part of the rate report. It will be part of the Prop 218 notification, but the drought rates don't actually go into effect until the board makes a declaration of the stage 3 of the drought, and then also, and they have to do that by adopting a resolution, and they also adopt a resolution to then implement the drought rates at the appropriate time. So the process that we're going through with this study and the Prop 218 notice and the public hearing is to authorize them from a Prop 218 standpoint. But again, those aren't actually implemented and put into a place until such time as that declaration is made of the stage 3 drought. The reason that we include them now is because if you waited till later, then you'd have to go through another Prop 218 noticing process, which means you have to mail notices to all the customers and have another public hearing and incur all those additional costs. So that they're being included here so that they're authorized, but again, they wouldn't be actually implemented and put into place until the board takes that action later if it's determined it's necessary. So the purpose of a drought rate is if the district does implement that stage 3, the hope is, the assumption is that they will, that residents will use less water based on things like limited watering on certain days of the week or other measures that the district puts into place to curtail water use. And as a result, the district will now have less water revenue. They'll be selling less water. Residents and customers will be consuming less water. But the need is still there for revenue to be generated to pay for all of the costs of operating the utility. And so the idea of a drought surcharge is to have an additional rate that can be put into place to ensure that the district is still able to collect enough revenue to pay the bills, even though they're selling, for instance, 10% less water. That's the assumption based on the McKinleyville's water shortage contingency plan. And so we want to make sure that if customers do conserve 10%, use 10% less water, that we have enough revenue to continue to pay the bills. The drought rates are determined using the same cost of service approach. So that's why, the amounts per tier aren't the same. They only affect the volumetric rate. Again, these are volume-based charges, and they're based on reduction in the amount of volume of the water being sold. So you see that the basic water rates and the drought rates for the fixed charges, the monthly base charges, the same. But the volumetric rates go up slightly. So you see for tier 1, the rates that I went through on the last slide, $2.47 per 100 cubic feet, now go up to $2.94 per 100 cubic feet for a difference of 47 cents. And in tier 2, once you go over 800 cubic feet, you have now $3.32 goes up to $3.89, and for a difference of 57 cents. And again, that's why they're slightly different for each tier, because they're based on the cost of service analysis. And then the Humboldt Bay pass-through is not affected. That's not part of the drought surcharge. So that would remain the same. Next slide, please. Here is a look at the sewer rates. So, different, I'm sorry, question?
Hi, Chris, Greg Orsini here. Sorry that this didn't come up until I was just sitting here right now, but the effect of, so we're taking into account the effect of the drought on the water rates, but was there any consideration or was there any analysis done related to what that reduction in usage of water if we were under a mandatory order for drought to our sewer rates?
No, just on the water side. Because the concept there being is that the sewer use is less discretionary. Water use, most discretionary water use is outdoor. To the degree that indoor water use is curtailed, it's typically not a significant enough change to really impact the amount of flow and return back to the wastewater system. So that's why it's primarily on the water side, because that's where people take the actions to based on the ordinance that's passed to reduce outdoor water use. It's usually outdoor water use that's targeted in the drought ordinance.
Thank you.
Yep. So here's the monthly base charge is at the top there. So all customers pay the $35.69. And then you see the volumetric rate. So again, customers pay a rate per 100 cubic feet that they send back to the sewer system. And you can see starting with, I won't read them all off to you, starting with the 2 sewer units commercial at the top, then apartments and bakery all the way down to the brewery at the bottom. Those are the rates per 100 cubic feet of water based on, again, those are using strength factors and BOD and SS to differentiate rates for different types of customers based on the strength of the effluent that they discharge back into the system, and then the proportionate cost of treating that effluent is why you see different rates for all different uses. So this is similar. The structure is the same as the district has had. The numbers came out differently this time because we had more current and up-to-date strength component data that we didn't have before, and so the numbers did shake out a little bit differently. But again, that's only in the first year, and then for subsequent years, they'll all go up the same amount based on the adjustments in revenue. So next slide, please. So here's a bill comparison that we did on the water side, and through review of the customer data, historical customer data for the district. The typical customer uses 600 cubic feet of water on a monthly basis. The current charge on the water bill would be $41.70. The proposed charge based on the revenue adjustment, rate adjustment would be $45.84 for an increase of $4.14. And then you see the changes for the others as well. Next slide, please. And here is a similar similar graphic, similar comparison for sewer. You see based again on the average user using 100 cubic feet of water, returning that much back to the sewer system. The current charge would be $51.93. The new charge would be $54.47 for a change of $2.54. Next, please. And here's what that same exact comparison, but now combining both water and wastewater together. So the average bill would go up about $6.68 for the user using 600 cubic feet of water per month for water and wastewater combined. Next. Here is a comparison, and we have done this previously as well. You see of where McKinleyville, both on an existing bill basis and on a proposed bill basis, would compare to a number of agencies. The dashed red line reflects the average. So both existing and proposed rates are still below the average, well below the average. McKinleyville would move above Reading and Crescent City just slightly based on the new rates. I think something to keep in mind, but still be well below Eureka, Humboldt, CSD, and Arcata. And you can see that this is sort of just the snapshot view. What we don't know is where the rest of these agencies are in their rate cycle. Pretty much every agency in California goes through this process every 5 years. And so, we don't know where, Crescent City or Eureka, for instance, are in their 5 year, whether they've just finished increasing rates or they might be changing rates, in the next year. The other thing we don't know is how they structure their operations and their costs. So it's definitely a valuable comparison. You do want to know how you're comparing to your neighbors, but you also don't have, some of the insight into how they operate their systems and whether they're investing in their systems and those kinds of things. But this is how it shakes out. Not a whole lot of change. Like I said, move above Reading and Crescent City, but still stay below the average and below the three much larger neighbors. Next slide, please. So now let's go back and take a look at the 5 year financial plan. So we'll look at the 5 year path of rates for both water and sewer. We'll look at how that typical bill changes. We looked at the first year snapshot just previously. Now we're going to look at the 5 year bill or that monthly bill over the 5 year period. And then we'll take a look at how the financial metrics that we talked about way back at the beginning that sort of led to this process, how they look now with the operating results over the 5 year financial plan with these changes incorporated. Next, please. So I won't read all the numbers. This is essentially the same table as before. It's just showing, instead of showing just 1 year, it's showing 5 years worth of rates. So you can see, for instance, the 5/8 meter, which again is the primary residential meter, goes from $19.80 to $25.10 over the 5 year period. So just over $5 change in the fixed charge. And then the volumetric rates go from $1.89 currently up to $3.04 over the 5 year period. And the over 800 meter rate, just the tier 2 rate, 800 cubic feet rate, tier 2 rate, goes from $4.73 up to, down to $4.07. And that's a function of how that cost of service analysis changed. So the cost shifted from tier 2 to tier 1, and that's why those rates are going up. And not the same for the over 800s. And that, if you think back to a couple slides ago where I showed that the typical customer in MCSD uses 600 cubic feet of water per month, that's all in tier 1. So it makes sense that more costs are allocable to that first tier, and that those rates are more proportionally more affected than the rates for the over 800 cubic feet usage. And then the Humboldt Bay pass-through, which is just an estimate. That's we don't know that until that's reported back to MCSD on an annual basis. So, but that's an estimate based on cost of living. Next slide, please. This is the 5 year rate path. Similar chart here for the drought surcharge. So the drought surcharge is going up, in the same percentages as the rates themselves. Again, the fixed charges the meter charges up above aren't impacted. Those are just going up the same amounts and the same dollars as we showed on the previous slide. And then the drought surcharge goes up from 47 cents and 57 cents for tier 1 and tier 2, up to 58 cents and 70 cents, tier 1 and tier 2 in year 5. Again, just to reemphasize it, we're not, these rates may or may not even be in place each or any of these 5 years. They wouldn't be put into place until the board's required to declare that stage 3 and pass a resolution to implement the surcharge. But that's what it would look like over the 5-year period. And then the very bottom just shows what the total rate would be, just the standard volumetric rate that we already talked about, with the drought surcharge added on. So in the first year, it'd be $2.94 for tier 1 and $3.62 in the 5th year. And then you can see the number there's for the over 800 cubic feet tier 2 rate, $3.89 in the first year, out to $4.77 in the last year, and then again the Humboldt Bay pass-through rate. Go ahead. And a lot more numbers here. Again, this is the same 5-year table of rates for the sewer, so you can see how those rates will change over the 5-year period. Next, please. And this is just a kind of a graphical way of looking at the combined bill. You can see the top that's broken down in numbers, the water, the sewer, and the combined. So under existing rates, the current monthly bill is $93.63. First year, it'll go up about $7 to just a little over $100. And then the last year, it'll be $121. So change of about $28 over that 5-year period. And then the bottom shows that kind of graphically. The blue represents the water, the green represents the sewer. So it's the same numbers, so you just kind of can see the change over the 5 years from the existing rate to the rates proposed for 2027 at the end of the 5-year period. Next, please. So again, this is just the same we showed at the beginning. These are the revenue adjustments, 6%, 6%, 5%, 5% for water, and 4%, 4%, 5%, 5%, 5% for sewer. So now let's take a look at how that affects the financial plan that we went through at the beginning. Next slide, please. So we stretched this out to 10 years because the primary thing that we were addressing on the water side and sewer as well is that days cash on hand. So you can see the top, the revenues and expenditures, the revenues are exceeding expenditures every year, and the net result line is going up. So now, where it was, just about $1 million at the beginning, and it was declining down to, I think it was about $500,000 by the 5th year. Now you can see it's steadily increasing, as is the debt service coverage. And the days cash on hand, while it takes a little bit of a dip in the middle 2 years there, you can see that by years 6 through 10, it's increasing back up to the policy level. And that was, necessary in order to try and minimize to the best extent possible the level of any of these adjustments. If, it was a kind of a collective decision. We went through a lot of discussions with staff, with Pat, with the finance committee, about different options here. And, so the idea being that, even in that lowest year, 2026, the district still has 200 days operating expenses, which is almost double, more than double what most utilities in the state. So still plenty of operating cash on hand, not in a dangerous, or bad position at all. Just not at the policy level. At that policy level is not a legal requirement. That is, it's strictly, an advisory type policy. And so, but by the end of you can see by year 9, it's back at the policy levels. Let's take a look at sewer. Next slide. Very similar picture. Oh, I'm sorry. First, we're going to look at this is just a tabular, numbers that the same, just a different way of looking at that information from the previous slide. So you can see, the revenues at the top, with water sales and other revenues, the total revenues, and then taking out the debt service and the O&M costs, so that you can see, the balance after paying debt service and everything else, and the net results. And then you can see the fund balance at the bottom starting at a little over $6 million. And by the end of the 5th year, it's $2.5 million. But again, that's just the 5 years shown on here. It's not the full 10-year. And then you can see that it is trending back up though, starting in the middle, to 2 million up to 2.1, up to 2.5, and then continues up on that trend that you saw in the previous graph. And the debt service coverage is great in all 5 years. Now, next slide. I think we're going to look at sewer now.
Another
Hey,
question.
Chris, can I jump in? This is Greg Orsini again. Can I jump in with another question?
Sure can, absolutely.
Related to slide 31, and that's the projections, the 10-year projections for our financial metrics. And so we kind of know where we're at up until 2027 related to what sort of adjustments we're going to need in what that's going to result in related to our days of cash on hand, our projected operating results, and our debt services. What assumptions were made from 28 to 32 related to the level of adjustments that were going to be necessary to get us back to 300 years worth of operating revenues by 2031?
Just basic inflationary, no, just cost of service only. So, and very minimal. So
basically whatever the cost of service increases were, that's all we booked for 28 to 32.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there we are. There's the sewer. So you can see similar picture. Again, looking at 10 years. Although just like the beginning picture, a little bit better than water on the fund balance slide. Still a little bit of a dip in years 2025, 26, but still over 200 days cash on hand, and then gets up to 300 days in 2027, and then stays about that level for 4 years. But then by the ninth and 10th year, it's back up to the full policy level. Again, the revenues are exceeding expenditures, and net results are up every year. The trend, and then the debt service coverage is well above the required 1.25. Next slide, please. And same as water, it's just an overview of the numbers. I won't go through again, revenues minus the O&M expenses minus debt. So you can see the net results line there, trending upward from 1.2 million up to 1.8 million. And you can see the fund balance, the beginning balance there, just over 6 million in the first year, and then the ending fund balance in the 5th year. Just the same results that we showed on the graph previous, just now with the numbers instead of the bars and the lines. Next slide, please. So the next steps, assuming that the board desires to move forward. So tonight you're not implementing rates, you're not putting any new rates in place or anything like that. You're just, the only direction or the only action that you're taking tonight is to set a date for the public hearing, which currently we're anticipating to be November 2nd. You'll authorize us to mail out the Proposition 218 notice. We have that notice already drafted. It's been reviewed by staff. We have the mailing house on standby. We have to have all this done in advance because we have to, in order to get to November 2nd, we have to have these dropped in the mail by next week. And then come November 2nd, the board will conduct a public hearing. They will allow the public, obviously, to come participate and provide, comments and questions and testimony, and be heard at that public hearing. Following the conclusion of the public hearing, any written protests will be tabulated. So those protests and their specific instructions provided in the notice that'll be mailed out. Pat kind of described the process a little bit back in his comments, but anybody can submit a written protest anytime from the time they receive the notice up until the close of the public hearing. So once that public hearing is closed, the board secretary will tabulate those, assuming that there are not more than half of the customers or owners of property within the service territory submitting those written protests. The board then will have the discretion to move forward and adopt the rates. The board could choose not to do that if they wanted to. They don't have to have a majority protest in order to, if the board decided for whatever reason that they didn't want to move forward with the rate increase, they could do that. However, if there is a written protest, if a majority of customers and property owners submit enough protests so that we do have a majority, then the process stops. The board can't override that. So those are the next steps. Again, once the public hearing is concluded and assuming there's no written protest, the board will then have the discretion to move forward with the adoption of the rates, and those will be implemented for billing beginning January 1st of 2023. So that's the end of our presentation, and so I'll turn it back to Pat or to the board for any questions and discussion.
Thank you. I think we got questions, so. Dennis, you want to go first?
Well, mine's a little sideways of the deal, so if you got specifics on what's going on with the rate study itself, go ahead. I'd be happy to go to the end. All right, so thank you. This is very detailed, and I appreciated it very much. I've got
Thank you.
that I would like to present, if there's no objections from the board and the general manager. Are you familiar with SB 222 in the legislature? It's okay.
Not offhand.
Well, it should be, and I want you to become much more acquainted with it. I'd like Pat, our general manager, to send you this information on it. It's a bill that has to do with equity. It fits right into our rate structure, methodology, and the revenue requirements, and the equity rate classing. This bill is something that pretty much all of us agree is a component that's necessary. That's to help disadvantaged ratepayers, et cetera, to help with rates. It's a structure, a way to make that happen, because we can't just do it right out of our rates to subsidize people. But anyway, this particular bill, we have opposed unless amended coalition of about 500 state water agencies, because they're wanting to require each individual district to develop the matrix of who is eligible and to reporting it to the state. And it should be the state's done this before in other bills where the state actually has it delegated to a water quality, state water board or some other entity, where they determine those matrices and take care of it, so that it's not a burdensome effort on the part of districts, especially small districts like us. And there's lots of other components to it. For instance, JPIA it has some concern that what if 15 or 20 ratepayers decided that they got shafted on this and didn't get done right, and they decide to sue McKinleyville Community Services District. That's it could happen, and it does happen. I'm not saying it will. So anyway, what I wanted to, with the approval of the board, if there's no objection, and if there's no objection from Pat, I'd like Pat to send you this information on SB 222, which was our oppose unless amended coalition, but it got through and it's on the governor's desk, and now we're doing an update of a coalition veto request directly to the governor. So if you'd look at that and the information sent, and if you deem, I think you will, I'd be very pleased if you would write a letter in support of amending this, of vetoing this request until it comes back for a very simple adjustment, which is done throughout the state in lots of ways. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Understood. I'll take a look at, I'm generally familiar with it now once you started to describe it, but yeah, Pat can send me some information and we can discuss it, and yeah, definitely.
Other than that, I find this to be very educational and very thorough, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
Greg's asked that
Thanks, Chris, for this great rate study that your staff and you put together for us, and thanks to Pat and our staff. Having been the general manager and the operations director, I know the amount of work it takes to put forth the information that you use to run the model and come up with the forecast for the rates and things like that. And it's definitely a labor-intensive process with lots of information, and we've relied on Willdan for many years to help us with these things, and we've always been impressed with your work. So a couple of things that I would like to go on the record as being a member of the board of directors, that I support regular incremental adjustments to our rates, and that we don't take years off of not raising rates. And so as long as I'm on the board, I'm always going to advocate for us raising the rates at least the minimum amount of whatever the inflation is, because if we don't, it can get us into serious trouble in years down the road. And if you don't pay for it as you're using it, you can generate huge premiums that have to be paid at a later date. And then also I want to also recognize, and I hope that the board recognizes too, and staff recognizes, if you go back to slide number 31, and it shows the water metrics for from now until 2032, you can see that we're going to be dipping into our cash on hand quite a bit for the first 6, for a while, and we won't come back to where we're at now until 2031. I went to staff, and Pat and the staff were definitely cognizant of the impact that this is going to have on the rate adjustments we're going to have on our rate payers, on our customers at this point in time, with things being so tough, with the cost of gas and the cost of food, and just the cost of living right now. So I just want to commend staff for having the fortitude to go this route. Now, with that comes a warning that there are pitfalls that are possible with us taking this, and that there are risks that we are putting ourselves into for unforeseen things. But I'm supportive of what we're doing with this right now, and I'll vote to approve this. Thank you.
Anyone else have comments? Anyone from the public have comments on this?
I do have one other thing. Nobody else has comments.
Okay, Greg again.
Okay, and this is basically just a typo, and it's in the public notice. It's in the table for the drought rates, and all the way down at the bottom it says HBMWD pass through, and it's got a number 2 footnote, and that should be number 1 footnote.
Yep, I see it.
Thank
you. I will make sure that gets changed before we finalize the proof with the print shop tomorrow, the next day.
Okay, yeah, having the experiences we've had with our 218 notices before, I know it's good to have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
All right, thank you, Greg.
Well, I think I could use a motion from
So
someone.
I'll move to authorize staff to set the 218 public hearing date for November 2, 22, regular board meeting, initiate the Proposition 218 majority protest notice and mailings concerning adjusting water and sewer charges in accordance with the Willdan Comprehensive Utility Rate Study.
I'll second it.
Director Bender,
Yes.
Director Clark Peterson. Aye. Director Mayo,
Yes.
Director Orsini,
Yes.
and President Couch.
Yes. All right, item E2.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, thank you, Pat. Thank you, members of the board, and we'll get the notices going out, and we'll keep Pat informed of that process, and we'll see you on November 2nd.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye.
All right, now we'll go to item E2, update from California Trout on the Mad River Restoration Project for the district percolation ponds. Pat and Mary Burke. Thank you, Mary, for being here.
Yep. Thanks, Mary. And rather than me reading through the staff note to introduce this project, I'm sure you are going to cover everything I want to. So I think I'm just going to turn it over to you to present this one.
All right, thanks a lot, Pat. Is it on? Okay. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, to see you again, MCSD board members and staff and members of the public. I'm thrilled to be in a position where I'm presenting. I'm sorry I couldn't be here last month. I got sick. So now I'm really happy to be here and share with you this project that is underway, the Botawat Mad River Estuary Project. And some of you may be more familiar with this just by its name, the Mad River Estuary Public Access and Habitat Enhancement Project. And I've started referring to the Mad River as the Botawat under direction from the Wiyot tribal chairman, Ted Hernandez. So it is a lovely name. So I am here as the North Coast Regional Manager and also on behalf of our staff, Katie Gurin, who has been on site working with the construction team. So next slide, please. So I work for California Trout. We are a statewide nonprofit. This graphic up here shows you the regions that we work in, and we do work up and down the state. The little blurb in white there talks about, you know, we build partnerships and work with the local community to find best solutions for fish and people. And I just want to start by thanking the board and staff for their leadership on this project. It's a project that I'm really proud of, and I'm excited to be here to share with you what's happening so that you can talk about it and, you know, hear what questions you might have for me, and hopefully think about what might come after this. Next slide, please. So we're just going to go through the current status, a little bit of the background, little information about the site, show you some pictures about the status, funding, and talk about, just sum up with some next steps. And Joey, I sent a picture to you that came from the site from today. That's pretty exciting. So maybe at the end, if you're able to, we could pull that picture up too. Okay, next slide, please. So current status, we are under construction. Believe it or not, this is right there in what was your percolation ponds right down by the river. So I'd just like to sort of start the presentation with the end, and that is to say that we are actively in construction, and it's really exciting. The landscape changes day to day. So let's dig in a little bit to the history. Next slide, please. So this project was based around these objectives. Really, the way I like to describe it is, and you know, Greg could, Director Orsini could speak to really the origin story of this project, which had to do with CDFW coming down and talking to you then as a general manager to look at the pasture, how it was being used, but then to consider the percolation ponds, because at that point, this district knew that those ponds were going to have to come offline. They didn't want to, y'all didn't want to use those in your operation system any longer. And so CDFW said, what a great place for habitat for juvenile salmonids. So that got the ball rolling, and created some momentum around the objectives, one, of deconstructing those percolation ponds, bringing the levees that surrounded those ponds back down to the floodplain level. So I like to say at the basis level, this project is just restoring that area back to the floodplain so that it can flood on a regular basis. On top of that, we're creating aquatic habitat, wetlands, ponds, and channels. So the wetlands and ponds could essentially mimic what is there now, and the channel helps get the fish from the main stem river up into this newly created habitat. So that's that third bullet. In addition, one of our funding partners, the Coastal Conservancy, saw this one line written into the grant about public access, and they said, there's public access down there, let's improve that. So we were able to add that to our design objectives. And then we had a third part to this project, which is now sort of just, I'm putting it in there for your knowledge. It's not that we're moving that forward, but it was a biofiltration study that you can still see the remnants of right next to this restoration project. Go ahead, next slide, please. So the timeline, this started some time ago. You saw in your board packet that the board wrote a letter of approval for the funding that was submitted, and we were awarded funding back in 2015. So those grants started with zero, started with a concept, and then took a while to work through design alternatives and figure out what was going to be the right fit for the property. We had the two funders there, California Coastal Conservancy and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then 5 years later, in 2020, you as a board were lead agency, and you adopted the CEQA document that said, we did a initial study, mitigated neg deck, and showed that we were doing all impacts mitigated within the project. And essentially, you know, we're creating a better habitat that's connected to the landscape. So it makes sense that there was no impact. 2020, we were able to get the implementation funding proposals written. 2021, they came in. We then were able to keep employing our contractors to develop construction documents, went out to bid, and in June of this year, we went through a public bid process and were able to award the lowest responsive and responsible bidder to Kernan Construction. Next slide, please. So at this point, I just want to say, a project like this, and all of my projects really are not done in a vacuum. They depend on a huge team. And I, again, want to emphasize y'all are part of that team, being such a willing and champion landowner to be able to allow a project this to move forward, and getting to work with James and Pat on a regular basis. You know, the staff has been always, you know, right there in support of doing something that's a little unusual for the district. So thank you always for being such a great teammates. Northern Hydrology and Engineering, Rose Patenaude, was your consultant way back when. She was helping you do some planning around the wastewater system. So through her knowledge and through her leadership, she brought the project to me, and together we developed those grant proposals. She is still with the project. She's out there checking grades. She's going to be back out on site checking grades tomorrow. We had have a local trail consultant, Chris Turner, who really helped us think through public access. The interpretive signage and re-veg planning is being done by the Redwood Community Action Agency, another nonprofit that is even bringing a little bit of funding as well to this project. Public access, the engineering firm is SHN, and we worked closely with them and John Northmore Robertson Associates, particularly around the paved ADA access loop. Samara Restoration is our native plant nursery. GHD, I put them down low on the list because, you know, last but not least, GHD has been so valuable to getting this project completed. They really went over and above to work with us to get the CEQA document ready, and now they're out there doing construction management and doing a fantastic job. And again, Kernan Construction is our construction contractor. And I also want to say, you know, agencies more and more are working really closely with partners like us to move projects forward and being involved from the beginning. So our agency members become partners, they help review documents, and then they help us get funding too, because agencies have recovery plans, and the funding is meant to, you know, fund those recovery plans. So in this case, coho salmon is our target listed species that the project was sort of built around. So I want to acknowledge our agency partners as well. Next slide, please. So location, 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 right? This location is phenomenal. So the first slide here, I just want to say for the public access side, the public access project is going to be accessible by foot, by, you know, with a stroller, a wheelchair, by horseback. You know, it's right there at the end of School Road Trail that you see running along School Road, and it will allow people to get from the end of that paved trail all the way out to that coastal overlook. It's going to be a fantastic asset for this community, a place for, you know, reflection and solitude, and looking over that incredible river and the coastline. Next slide, please. And for the percolation ponds shown here on the right bank or the close bank of the river, you know, you can see the proximity to the ocean. We're just a few miles from the ocean. So this is a really important key point of habitat that's really lacking in the Mad River. This slide also shows how the river itself is a rather single channel. So there's not a lot of what we call off-channel habitat opportunities for these juvenile salmonids. So right, the salmonid life history, the adults swim upstream, you know, lay eggs, and then those juveniles start to come out. Each species has its different timing, but as they're coming down the river, they start to partition, you know, and look for their own place. And when the river is really gushing, those little fish can get swept right out into the ocean. So what we're doing by creating habitat down here is giving those little fish a chance to get out of that main stem flow and get back into a really calm, quiet place where there's food in the wetlands, and then they can eat and grow big and healthy before they go out to the ocean. And if they grow big and healthy, then they have a much better chance of survival coming back as adults and continuing the cycle. Next slide, please. Just a couple of historic images. You know, this one, I think as you look along the coastline here, this is 1947, you can see all the historic places where that mouth used to come out, which is just sort of a point of interest. I think what we're looking at right here is that the river turned basically kind of right where School Road is and would go straight out there. Since this time, as you know, if you're familiar with the beach out there, Mad River Beach, those dunes have grown, become hardened, you know, and the river tends now to shoot down this coastline. Next image, please. And, you know, one of the other things that we know about the system is it's sediment impaired. So there's a lot of sediment. There's also some erosion that has happened, and this kind of sets us up for talking in a few slides about the County Bluff Stabilization Project that happened. This is the bluff. You can see it already here in 1955. There was some erosion, and of course then there was a community built right there, so some houses were threatened by erosion, and there was a large stabilization project that was built. Okay, next slide, please. So here's your basic elements of the project. This shows you Fisher Road orientation, School Road orientation, and now this whole floodplain is owned by the district. At the time when we were working on this project, the district hadn't yet purchased the lowest portion of this property for wastewater irrigation. Again, those percolation ponds coming offline were, you know, it's kind of a piece of what you did as the district was acquire more property to irrigate, so that those percolation ponds being offline were not a limiting factor to the ability to irrigate the wastewater. this project is also sort of separated in space. We weren't able to take public access any further than the bluff and then slightly down into the floodplain. So you can see the public access comes in connected from the paved surface of School Road Trail, and then the habitat takes off and goes to the south. And these channels are going to flush with tidal cycles. And as we're seeing right now, we're encountering water at a 4-foot elevation. So as Kernan is digging, that water is already there, which is really exciting for people that are very interested in fish health, to know that that water is coming through the ground, which helps keep it cool. And there's an arrow right there showing you where the biofiltration project is located. Okay, next slide, please. So the opportunity here, again, I talked about the coho opportunity, and then there was an opportunity to plant, native vegetation in here. I do want to put a little pin in the topic of vegetation, and that one thing we experience as restoration professionals is that when there's a few invasive species plants on site, it can be a real challenge to manage them through time. I want you to know I'm not going anywhere, and we're going to be active in managing the site to encourage the native plants to grow up strong and healthy. There's a plant, reed canary grass, that's down there. There's Himalayan blackberry. We've already done one round of invasive plant removal with our CAA, more focused on the public access area. But we have a lot of plants with Somara restoration that are growing up and are ready for putting in the ground about November of this year. And we put a lot of plants in so that we can get good coverage and try to outcompete those invasive plants. We're never going to have 0 invasive plants on site, but we're going to do our best to help manage them. So there's the opportunity. And the next slide. The next slide shows you the design again here. It was really small on that other graphic. So on the upper side is the whole project feature. From the right, again, is where it connects with the drainage channel. And then we have these essentially slough channels that wind their way back through the riparian and terminate in a pond and a wetland. So the lower graphic blows that up for you. You can see the oval with the D. That's the deep water pond. It goes to 0 elevation. And then as you move to the left, C and B, that's a bench on the far left and bottom corner. That's a bench that's going to be planted with riparian plants, and a little bit up in the screen is going to be an emergent plant wetland. Okay, next slide. So here we are out on site, construction management and engineering oversight. That's the levee, so standing where the channel is going to come into the percolation ponds. That's the size of the levee that is currently, or it was currently, restricting the floodwaters from being able to get in and out of there. Next slide, please. So for me, one of the hardest things is the start of the project. You're going into an area that's full of trees, and the first thing you have to do is take a bunch of trees down. I'm getting used to it now because I'm starting to see where the water's going to find its way in there, and it just takes a little to sort of honor the growth of those trees that have been there. You can see we have a huge bunch of chips that have been made out of this. So we're essentially turning those trees back into the mulch that's going to help those native plants grow really well. So there's some of the work that's going on right now. There's Rose Patnod with NHE and Jeremy Savella with GHD. And Kernan's equipment in the background. Next slide, please. And here we have, again, that picture of standing in the middle of the percolation ponds. Here's Corey Hayes, he's also with GHD, and there's Katie Gurin from my office. And this is a view looking towards the mouth of the Mad River. So this is looking north and slightly west, and this is the route the channel's going to take. The picture over here to the right shows you some early work that Kernan's doing. They're learning how to install the habitat features in the channel, and they're cutting that channel down. Again, it's already got water in it, and then it's gonna have tidal water coming in and out. The tidal water is gonna help keep that channel open, and help encourage any sediment to move in and out of the system.
Mary, can I ask you a question right
Of
there?
course, yes.
You know, we got a lot of sediment coming down that river. So you said that the tidal action is gonna help keep that. Is that sediment is that gonna be a problem? Is that a continuing problem or not? Is that not in the equation?
The river is sediment impaired, certainly. And if you're familiar with the site, like Rose and I have some photos that document the buildup of sediment in this location. So low in river systems, this is what happens, right? Sediment, it's a natural, whether it's impaired or not, sediment comes down rivers. When it hits a flatter grade, it settles out. So this is exactly why the framing of this project, the basic thing that we're doing, that you authorized to do, was bring those levees down to the floodplain elevation. So channel or not, we have created wetland habitat, wetland and ponds. Rose did her best with the funding we gave her to design a channel that would convey enough water with enough force in the tides to try to keep that open. There's no saying whether it gets clogged up, but again, you know, we are here as an organization and me as an individual who we're interested in keeping habitat like this productive.
So,
So
hopefully we won't have to, but if we need to, we can do some maintenance on cleaning that up.
yes, and you should know we did not write into any of our permits that you have to, right? So it's going to be voluntary action if you choose to do so. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. Right, the public access opportunities. So you can see along the bluff, there is the stabilization that's in place. So this is a bioengineering, which they installed large riprap boulders and then put willows in there. So the willows have grown up, providing habitat along that bluff. That bluff then is really stable, which makes it a fantastic place to have people with public access. There is a steep embankment at the very top. So as part of the design, we'll get to that in a second. There's a small fence, not something that's going to block a view, a small foot rail fence that sort of indicates, hey, don't go beyond this. There's the path leading out to the coastal view, and as you can see, it's a place that you wouldn't want to go if you're concerned about ticks. You wouldn't want to go if you're not good with uneven footing. So it's going to be really exciting to take that paved surface right out there to the bluff. The other thing that's going to happen here is the county is going to install parking, and the project is going to support them by working with Kernan to lay a concrete ADA parking stall right here. This is not going to be a parking lot. I know that the CEQA document allowed us to go much bigger, but this is, I think it's 4 parking stalls, just like people park now, that are parallel to the road. Next slide, please. So here's what the public access looks like. The paving will come out. There's a picnic bench. There's a couple of benches. They're looking sort of north and south out there on the bluff. And then that paving wraps around, and you know the current place, there's a bench, that's going to be taken out and it'll be made ADA accessible as it drops down the bluff. And then there's a little loop that comes back up to the entrance point. There will be an entrance kiosk, there will be interpretive signage, there will be garbage cans and recycling cans, and a bike parking lockable feature. Next slide, please. So right at the beginning of this project, the previous recreation director was able to find some implementation funding, and you were able to hold on to that funding till the very last moment And the district was able to build a feature that organized that riprap to provide a water access feature. So this was skillfully and artfully done to, like I said, it's not a ramp, it's not without, you know, it's a wildland interface. So it's a rough steps that allow people to get into the river. Of course, as an organization that was founded by people who like to fish, the users that I've seen down there, like the very next day, you know, somebody came down to the property with their fishing pole and was down there fishing, like the very day after this was built. So it is getting used. Okay, next slide. So here's some interpretive signage. It's about 90% level completion. It tells you about the site. It talks about how the district is allowing multiple benefits to happen on this property. The basis being for the wastewater reuse and irrigation, and then building up upon that. There will be a map for orientation, and it'll let you know allowable activities. Next slide, please. There's also an interpretive sign that's done about the estuary itself with some great artwork by the local artist. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but beautiful renditions of birds. Next slide, please. And we have a sign that was developed in partnership with the Wiyot tribe, and this speaks to, it uses Wiyot language to describe plants. It talks about ancestral territory, and it talks about the tribe in their own language, you know, a living culture that is here today. And I'll use this slide to expand a little bit and say that through the project, MCSD and the tribe have found ways to deepen this relationship a little bit. Adam Cantor, who's the Natural Resources Director, has been on site, has worked with us on the revegetation plan, is going to come back and help inform the planting plan, and will invite tribal members to come out and participate in the planting. And this sort of sets a stage for perhaps future use that was communicated to me, I believe, through Pat, that the board indicated having that layer of benefits and having tribal presence on the property is something that would be welcomed. I know you have maybe policy to work through or guidance or whatnot, but at least through the project, we have an opportunity to involve the Wiyot tribe and people as we go to implement this project. And we are developing a fourth sign currently, sort of with that forward-looking lens, and I'll be sure to circulate a draft when we have it so that the staff can see it, and we'll let Pat decide if he wants to bring it to the board for approval. Yes.
Whatever came of that program, the educational program?
Next slide. I think it's right here. Yes. No, yeah. So I did just learn that the Humboldt County Office of Education, my understanding is they're kind of putting this on hold right now while they work through how they want to structure the, and I hope they keep it going, but how they want to structure the Quest program. We have a brochure that's developed in draft form on this project. And in case you're not familiar with the Quest program, it's kind of like a place-based scavenger hunt. MCSD agreed to be the holder of a patch. And so like a family would go out, they'd read through the questions on this brochure, and they'd learn about the site, and then they'd come back to like the recreation office and say, hey, I finished this quest, and then they would be given a patch. And there are quests all over the county. Perhaps I think they're even outside of the county, but Humboldt County has really been the focal point. So I'm kind of waiting to see myself what's going to happen with the program, but thank you for your willingness to support it. You had indicated that purchasing patches and printing brochures were activities that were going to be pretty nominal as far as the cost, and could be a great recreational amenity. Next slide, please. So here was just a slide about the biofiltration project. So we did learn that, you know, cottonwoods take up water and nutrients more than the pasture grass does. The results were a little mixed on the other types of vegetation. As of now, there's no action coming out of this, but we did learn a bit about that, you know, having planted the area. And the cottonwoods that were planted first are doing great. The rest of the area, the fence has been removed, and it's essentially there's a road kind of going through there now for construction, and there was really no reason to continue that study any further. Next slide, please. So the dollars and cents. We raised about $426,000 for planning, design, compliance. And for implementation, we're at about 1.5 million. So that, again, is the State Coastal Conservancy. The State Coastal Conservancy wrote to a federal partner with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and brought in $359,000. NOAA Restoration Center's grant program brought in almost $500,000. And the Wildlife Conservation Board, their public access program, brought in $368,000. And then, of course, MCSD's grant and in-kind funding. Next slide, please. There are also additional local project funders. The California Alternatives to Toxics group has brought some funding to help support CalTrout in moving this project forward. Redwood Community Action Agency came forward with their own pot of funding to help contribute to this project. Humboldt County itself is building the parking area, and then, of course, we can do it without you, your support, your staff time. So thank you very much. I think that's my last slide. Oh, no, right, next steps. So we are in business. This floodplain, the habitat excavation is going to happen for about the next 3 weeks. That's kind of their timeline. Public access could get started as soon as about 2 weeks from now. So the public can expect there to be, you know, barriers and really attempts to keep people out. We don't want any unsafe access happening down there. The whole project, as far as the Kernan's work, is going to wrap up in the middle of October, and then we'll bring in the revegetation crew. We're using Redwood Community Action Agency paired with the SEAS, the Conservation Corps. And then who knows what the future looks like, right? I've heard on a news program, and I heard Greg, when you were general manager, Pat reiterated the same basic intent that perhaps there's an opportunity to take public access farther around this floodplain area. There are some existing features like the farm road and the levee that still remain that would help support some public access out there. And from a restoration standpoint, I think there's a lot of opportunity to encourage more habitat. And I would really like to partner with the district on a ribbon cutting ceremony and get some good press and, you know, excitement around finally getting to this point where this project is real on the ground. That is my last slide. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I see Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, for all the work you've done on this and taking this from an idea that was so serendipitous that, for a little bit of background, we had pulled a permit to excavate the drainage ditch around, and somebody called Fish and Wildlife and said we were draining marshland, and so a couple of the wardens came out, and I gave them a walk of the property. I didn't go to jail that day, so I must have done everything right. And during that process, it sort of put this planted the seed in my brain that I knew that we were going to decommission the percolation ponds. I knew that it was gonna cost the district some money, and I thought that there could be a better way, something better to do with that, and at that point in time, talking to Fish and Wildlife, that they planted that seed, and then I think you and I, like about maybe 2 or 3 years later, had that conversation and got the ball rolling. But I just want to thank you very much, because without your tenacity for this and the amount of time that it's taken for us to get to this point, it probably wouldn't have happened without you being there and pushing us along. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for your leadership, and, you were right there at the beginning and bringing it forward.
And so, and also, I think that I would definitely like to see the WIAT involved when we do whatever, so that they can do a cultural ceremony along with the ribbon cutting. I think that would be very appropriate for us, and I would very much like to see that happen.
Great. I'll extend that invite. Thank you.
Can you tell me again how to pronounce the project name?
The Badawat,
Okay.
that's
And that's
the name of the river.
Right, and that's what we're calling that's part of our project name, or the signage that's there says, it's not on, it was on your slide, but it's not in our packet.
Yeah, so there is a WIAT name that has been discussed for this site. I know you don't have an application in front of you, but the name, if I can get close to pronouncing it, is Lewetcut.
Yes.
And I believe that means a high place overlooking the river.
Yeah. And I really, I think that's something that we would all support. As you know, we consulted on our solar array for a proper name for that. So we got around and around to getting to where I'm trying to get with this. I was hoping that maybe we could think about this. It doesn't have to be right, but whatever it is, the names and stuff, and then I'd kind of like, because he spent a lot of time there and it meant a lot to him, I would just like to proffer the thought for discussion that we put a subtitle on this George's Trail. Because George liked to go down there. He really went down there with his kids in the bike and bicycle, and just, it was a kind of a special place. Just a thought. I just, think about that as this moves on. Not to be that's the name, but just the nomen, the like, this, and this is George's Trail. So anyway, I just throw that out.
Any other questions?
Yeah, anyone out there, I think, referring to George Wallace, right?
No.
No? George Wheeler, sorry, of my mistake. But, yeah.
That's how you know, isn't it?
Yeah. I just think having a middle note.
No, I think John Corbett would beat us up if we named it.
So here's,
Yeah.
Joey just pulled up the picture I got as I was sitting there. This is today's picture. So you can see the channel getting cut in. You can see the water's already in there coming in through the ground. So this is, I believe this is, the river is behind us and we're looking towards the percolation ponds.
That's water perking up, right?
It is, yeah.
And the river's as low as it's gonna get right now, so.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Well,
good.
let's hope it's as low as it's gonna get.
Yeah, that's pretty good that it's gonna push that kind of water up in there, and that'll help. And so one of the things too, but one of the things that we went into this eyes wide open is we don't know how long this project's gonna actually last. I mean, we could have a catastrophic flood and this could really be wiped out, but the district would not be on the hook related to putting it back, so, or it could last for a long time, so.
Exactly. Again, the lowers, our lower rivers are constantly changing and evolving. And thanks, again, to our agency partners that really recognize that. Bob Pagliuco, was really a champion for, we got to build the habitat and let it evolve. I mean, that's what it does.
And just so you know, that old saying from, build a dream, you build it, they will come. A lot of people have the misconception that somehow we're gonna plant some fish, that these are all gonna be native species that are gonna find their way in here as they're coming downriver. And, we've actually, HSU, when it was HSU, it was, Cal Poly Humboldt, did some fish surveys in there. We actually found coho salmon up in the drainage ditch. So, I think that if we make this more inviting to them. Feed them water. Huh? That will be beneficial to the salmon.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Mary, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good project and a lot of work, and it's amazing how long these things take and how much god darn money. Yeah.
I think you got lots of volunteers who are ribbon cutting.
Will there be food?
Yeah. We'll make sure. Well, thanks again. Okay, so now we're to item E3. Consider approval of change order to repair rafters on Cochrane Tank 1 as part of the tank cleaning project. James.
Joy, thanks for doing that. It helped me a lot. I just couldn't hear it all.
MCSD capital improvement budget scheduled with the Cochrane Road 1 million gallon water tank to be repainted this fiscal year. The tank was last painted in 2002. The tank is to be sandblasted to white metal on the interior, primed and painted. The exterior will be water blasted, sand primed, and the entire exterior top coated to design standards and specifications. Unified Field Service Corporation was the low bidder, which we brought to you for this project last month. And during the performance of this work, the top dome was taken off the tank, and the existing rafters that meet the center support were found to be seriously corroded, which you can see on the photos on 1 and 2 below. Corrosion on the center end of the rafters extend back approximately 6 feet in the worst cases. District staff asked for prices for alternatives to perform the repair of the rafters prior to the painting. 2 alternatives were presented. One was installed a 16-foot diameter halo to pick up the corroded ends of the rafters, and install 4 new support columns for the halo. The other alternative presented here was to install a new 8-foot diameter halo supported by existing center column and install 30 new rafters. This option was $10,000 cheaper than option 1. It was also observed that some of the existing rafters were beginning to twist, and this solution would be addressed that issue. The proposed option would be to provide 30 new rafters and should allow for 50 years of additional life out of the tank roof. Will allow for the better access to the roof plate for sandblasting and painting, and again extending the life of the roof, and hopefully will be the last major repair needed for this tank.
Thanks.
Staff recommends the board review the information presented, take public comment, and approve the change order number 1 to Unified Field Service Corporation for the installation of a new support halo and 30 rafters at Tank 1A for the sum of $204,548.58, and authorize the general manager to sign the change order to allow the work to proceed.
So, President, subject to board and public comment, I'd like to move approval of change order 1 to Unified Field Service Corporation for the installation of a new support halo and 30 rafters at Tank 1A for the sum of $204,548.58, and also to authorize the general manager to sign the change order to allow the work to proceed.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Seeing none?
Director Bender?
Yes.
Director Clark Peterson? Yes. Director Mayo?
Yes.
Director Orsini?
Yes.
And President Couch.
Yes. All right, item E5, consider approval of water and wastewater capital improvement plan modification. Nicole Alvarado. Nope, did I skip one?
E4, I thought.
Oh, no. No.
The track and park
Okay,
authorization.
Sorry. E4, discuss and consider approval of a contract with Melton Design Group Incorporated for the design of the BMX track and park, authorizing the general manager to sign the contract. Leslie.
In spring of 2022, MCSD was awarded a $2.3 million grant to design and construct a BMX track and park at the undeveloped 3-acre parcel located at School Road and Washington Avenue. An RFP for the design of the project was released on June 30th with proposals due on July 29th. 3 proposals were received from Melton Design Group, Inc., Standing Wave Engineering, and Mark Thomas. General Manager Kaspari and myself and the Operations Director James Henry and Recreation Coordinator Jen Anderson reviewed all 3 proposals, and the rankings are detailed below. As shown in the table, Melton Design Group, their proposal ranked the highest. Staff reviewed the scope of work and fees, met with the MDG team, and reviewed the scope and timeline and feel confident in their ability to meet the requirements of the project scope as outlined in the grant contract. Staff recommends that the board review the information, discuss, take public comment, and consider the approval of the contract with Melton Design Group, Inc. for the design of the BMX track and park project in the amount of $375,980 or $375,986. I can't talk. And a 10% contingency in the amount of $37,600, and authorize the general manager to sign the contract.
Can I ask you a question? Just curious, there's a big discrepancy between Thomas and Melton. Was there some?
It's how they rolled their fees together. So there were some, well, actually, I don't know how. I can say that in my memory, the Mark Thomas, the construction administration fees were much higher than the other 2.
Yeah, it looks like one of the bigger gaps is in the projects in the two. Okay. On the top of page 170. Big gap there.
Yeah. Just curious.
Well, just in there, like their cost, in terms of the bottom line, the cost difference, it was in construction management.
The management, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So I'd happy to move this recommendation, subject to board conversation and public comment for the design of the BMX track, and authorize the general manager to sign the contract.
Can I recommend a friendly modification? That the board also find Melton Design Group most qualified.
Yes, thank you, that makes perfect sense, so I'll add that.
I'll second that with the qualification.
Any more board discussion? The public section? We'll move for a vote.
Director Bender?
Yes.
Director Clark Peterson? Aye. Director Mayo?
Yes.
Director Orsini?
Yes.
And President Couch.
Yes. All right, now I can do E5. Consider approval of water and wastewater capital improvement plan modification. Nicole Alvarado.
Okay, thank you. So this is a continuation of an agenda item from the last board meeting. During the FY 22-23 capital improvement plan budgeting process, $150,000 for the design phase of the office remodel and $600,000 was budgeted to purchase the property located south of the existing district office. After a competitive bidding process, LDA was ranked the highest architectural firm. At the August 3rd, 2022 board meeting, the board approved the professional services agreement in an amount not to exceed $357,472. Since this amount exceeds the original FY 22-23 budget, with the line item, staff is requesting the $210,000 be moved from the property purchase line item to the capital improvement plan office remodel line item. So staff recommends the board review the information provided and approve the modification to the 2022-2023 CIP.
Thank you. Anyone have comments?
So I'll do the same thing, subject to board discussion and public comment. I move to recommend board approve the modification for the FY 2022-23 CIP for the office remodel design.
Thank you, Dennis.
I'll second that.
Well, we move forward to discussion, public discussion, have a vote.
Director Bender?
Yes.
Director Clark Peterson?
Yes.
Director Mayo?
Yes.
Director Orsini?
Yes.
And President Couch?
Yes. Okay. All right. Item E6 is consider approval of resolution 2022-25 declaring its official intent to reimburse itself for the proceeds of a tax-exempt financing for expenditures. Again, Nicole.
Okay, thank you. This also relates to the office remodel project. The district has been considering an office remodel for the last several years. At the August 3rd, 2022 regular board meeting, the district approved a contract with LDA designers and architects in the amount of $357,472 to prepare the new office design and construction bid documents. The LDA scope of work also includes developing a cost estimate for the eventual construction to allow the district to budget for construction in the 2023-2024 and/or 2024-2025 fiscal years. The remodel construction is anticipated to cost $3 to $3.5 million. It is likely the intent of the district to finance the construction. At the August board meeting, Director Orsini directed staff to check with Brandis Tallman about whether we could capture the design costs and include the future financing costs. So we did ask Brandis Tallman if we could put together a resolution to eventually finance the design costs, and they recommended the attached resolution. So staff recommends that the board review the information provided, discuss, take public comment, and consider approval of resolution 2022-25.
Thank you.
So if there's no subject to board comment and public, I will also move that we take approval of resolution 2022-25.
Thank you, Dennis. Who wants to jump in?
Second it.
Moved and seconded.
Well, I'll second.
No, she
Joe
seconded.
wanna
I
get
was
in?
waiting
Oh, okay,
for
I'm sorry, I
board
wasn't sure. Any
discussion.
discussion, public discussion?
Yeah.
I think we're good, let's have a vote.
Okay. Director Bender?
Yes.
Director Clark Peterson? Aye. Director Mayo?
Yes.
Director Orsini?
Yes.
And President Couch?
Yes, thank you. All right, E7, elections update and consider approval of appointment recommendation process. April Sousa.
So on April 17th, 2022, the Humboldt County Elections Department notified the district of a lack of candidates for the upcoming Board of Directors race, in which 3 board seats are open. Incumbents Directors Couch and Mayo submitted appropriate candidate paperwork by the August 12th deadline. An extension for the public was granted to August 17th, 2022 for the 3rd seat, as the incumbent did not refile. No additional candidates filed for the 3rd seat. For the lack of candidates for the open seat, the process for filling this vacancy is different than the usual process for filling a board vacancy. Per Humboldt County elections process, after the election, which will be November 8th, or on November 8th, the election office will ask if the MCSD board has any recommendations for an appointment for the 3rd seat. This recommendation will go to the Board of Supervisors along with other information on the 2 candidates who did file. The Board of Supervisors will then vote to approve the appointments of all 3 candidates, and the election office will send MCSD a notice of appointment in lieu of election for Directors David Couch and Dennis Mayo, and a separate notice of appointment for whomever has been recommended for the 3rd seat. The MCSD board can recommend anyone to this seat and can choose any process to ascertain a suitable candidate. There are no time restraints on this process, except that the process resulting in a recommendation must be complete before the November 8th election date. One process that staff suggests is soliciting letters of interest from the community to be discussed at the October 5th or the November 2nd regular board meeting, and an appropriate candidate chosen from those interested. The board needs to approve parameters for these letters of interest. Past guidelines used for applicants for filling vacancies include McKinleyville residence history, work history or business background, education history, community service history, personal concept of what special districts are and specifically what MCSD does, new perspectives that applicants would bring to the board. The schedule below includes the process of accepting letters of interest and action to be taken at upcoming meetings. The board may consider alternate dates, but the next step is to collectively decide on guidelines for applicants to follow with submission of their letter of interest. The term for this seat will begin the first board meeting in January 2023 and will run through the end of the calendar year 2026. And so you can see the dates and the tasks there below. Staff recommends that the board review the information provided, discuss, take public comment, consider approval of the appointment recommendation process as detailed in the staff note, and set parameters for acceptance and review of letters of interest for applicants, and appointment of the recommended candidate to the Humboldt County Elections Office for approval by the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, April. Oh, do we have any questions? All right.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few. So, we have, so for this to, so whether we find another candidate or not, basically what we're doing is we'll be pulling ourselves out of the election. MCSD will be pulled.
There will
off
be
the
no
ballot.
election.
There'll be no election.
Correct.
And then, so Dennis will just be an appointed board member. He won't really be elected. Okay, I'm glad I know that now. So anyway.
Well, me too.
Yeah, you too.
So you can look at it like this. Either the public really is right behind and groovy with everything we're doing, or they're so repulsed they don't want anything to do with it. Take your pick.
It's probably 50-50.
Take your pick.
So anyway, what process, since we're having such great luck finding people that are interested for the 5th seat, what's the process if we don't by November 8th or November 9th, whenever that's got to go back to the Board of Supervisors? What happens if we don't have a person?
Correct?
That's a good question, and so I have not, I actually talked with the President Couch about this, and I have not gotten anything back from the elections on that if we don't have somebody to recommend. The Board of Supervisors is going to appoint somebody.
Yep.
They want our recommendation on who that's going to be.
Yep.
If they don't have somebody by that time,
They will appoint.
you know, I don't know what the process is, if they're going to go through their own process. to appoint somebody, or how that would work.
Well, and that was another question I had. So, the Board of Supervisors, has the ability or the latitude to accept the recommendations we make, or they could just say, we're gonna pick 3 people.
No.
No, only one
No,
person.
no,
They'll
not at all.
automatically do the people who have
Two,
filed.
Dave and I are directors, no matter what happens.
Are you sure about that?
Absolutely. Dave and I are directors, no matter what happens. Board of Supervisors traditionally will accept whatever.
I would, yes, I
Okay.
agree with you on that, but I don't know that to be a fact.
Well,
It's just
okay,
possible.
let me just restate that. That's my assumption.
Yes.
But I am very clear, as we all should be, if we don't have a recommendation, whatever process the board goes through is their own business. They will pick a director.
And so, my concern is that, that at this point in time, that we're sort of putting all of our, trust in the Board of Supervisors, not that they're gonna do anything hinky, but we're sort of taking away our own destiny, or our own control over our own destiny here.
So I talked to Tony Soprano already, don't worry.
Okay, so anyway, isn't he dead? So, anyway, I think at this time, it would behoove us to have some consultation with our general counsel on steps, so that we are still in complete control of what's gonna happen.
So we have surety.
So we have a surety, yes, because, you know, I could, because part of the process is that we could basically just say to the Board of Supervisors, we're gonna make this your responsibility to find that spot. We could do that. I would much rather have us have the vetting of who that seat is going to be filled by. And I just want to make sure that we're protected, you know, and I know with Pat Pat's here, but I'm not in no way directing staff to do that. That's Pat's responsibility.
Well, and you're right about that, and on one level, another level, it's our responsibility. Get out and find the people. That's part of our purview. We can go talk to people and bring people in.
And as board members,
find
we
somebody good
should
to
be, we should
Yeah.
absolutely be doing that. I have
And-
been, but everybody tells me
Yeah.
no. But,
Well, that's, like I said before, they either really like what we've been doing or they really don't.
yeah.
I haven't figured it out exactly. Anyway.
Anyway, I just think that at this point in time, that we, because I know that this is one course, but this is like, when this process comes up, it's like a flow chart that, if yes, you go here, if no, you go
Yeah.
here, and there's a whole bunch of, there's not just one
So
path.
Greg, are you suggesting that the president, tell Pat to get a hold of our council and consult on this?
Yes. I'm recommending that.
Yeah.
Well,
That's what I meant, yeah.
And also, I think that, yes, I think that we should, we should have at least more than one thing up our sleeve, being the type of person I am, I just always feel much better having contingencies. And now that I don't see us as having any contingencies.
So I see in here, as a task for tonight, we have board to set parameters for letters of interest from interested applicants to appear to notice to the public.
As if you want to go this route.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think for,
We've got a template from what we did before.
That's,
And
yeah, and
Not
that's
a
what's on
template.
And I
here.
believe that's what,
Yeah.
what this bullet point is,
Yeah.
what you guys came up with the last time.
Pat, I think they're asking you.
I'm gonna ask Director Orsini to lean it into his mic. So I only picked up about half of what Greg was saying.
sorry.
And that's okay. But what I took away from that is he wants us to talk to legal counsel about the process, and we absolutely can do that. I would like to get some direction, though, if they come back and say, yeah, per what the county elections office said, blah, 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 you can do this. If Russ says, yeah, that's the process, I would like to get direction from the board of, okay, we confirm that's the process, this is what we want to do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so to go a little bit further, so the rest of the board knows that they don't have to wait until we vote on this. I'm in support of what staff has proposed right now. I think, like I said, I think that we should go into this eyes wide open,
Right.
more about what's going on here related to, relying on the, can you still hear me, Pat? Am I?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so that we fully know what our rights are related to, what the Board of Supervisors has the authority to do.
So my understanding is then, Greg, is that what staff has developed, we want that to just move right ahead, right on, just keep on going. But Director Orsini suggestion that, Pat, you also talk to legal counsel while that's going on and help us better understand exactly what may or may not occur.
Yeah, and I believe staff understands direction, and we will do that and report back at the October board meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Was that a motion, Dennis? Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. When you get ready, April.
Yeah, just making sure I've
That's
got
all
it
right.
all. All right, Director Bender,
Yes.
Director Clark Peterson. Aye. Director Mayo,
Yes.
Director Orsini,
Yes.
and President Kett.
Yes. Okay, then we're on to section F, which is active committee reports. Parks and Recreation Committee,
Did not meet.
not meet. Area Fund. Did not meet. Redwood Region Economic Development Commission.
Yes, met. There was a interesting presentation from the North Coast Growers Association about the challenges and opportunities of farmers around here. That was presented. But other than that, nothing to report.
Did you guys have any discussion about our raised buildings?
No.
Because it's supposedly a pot outfit going in there.
Yeah.
Have we got an application for that yet?
Okay. It'd be nice to see something happen with that building. I would rather it was something else, but for instance, HSU. President Jackson, if you're listening, bring some of that university growth to McKinleyville.
Okay. McKinleyville Senior Center Board.
McKinleyville Senior Center's had a lot of stuff going on.
Oh, good.
Okay, mid-August, we had a Senior Planet, the Senior Technology Information Seminar on online health resources available for seniors, and that was semi-well attended, and we're going to have another one coming up on September 12th about benefits of the seniors learning how to operate the internet and their cell phones correctly.
Scott?
Yes?
Can I ask you something that maybe, I don't know whether it's legal, but in that health assessment for seniors, is there a way that we could ask the other senior community so that we could get an email list of people in McKinleyville that could be, that these services would benefit, but they're not necessarily coming. I know that's a kind of a stretch out, but I was hoping that whatever this kind of stuff that we develop, we could, you know, the email deal, people are on mailers and stuff, that a lot of people that would benefit if they knew, but they're not part of our deal. I just want to throw that out. It's not, we don't need to have a big discussion, but I just wanted to prime the pump a little with that thought.
Okay, well, you know, I do try to spread the word as far and wide as I can. I publish a weekly program, and I distribute the programs out weekly to various places where seniors are. You know, back here at Thunderbird, Mobile Home Estates, out to Ocean West. I, you know, give it to the library to post over here. Golden Manor, Timber Ridge knows about it. I'm going to be working with them, their program, their recreation program, and you know, see if they could get some people over here to participate in our programs, and you know, work with them a little bit more. Yeah, anyway, so the computer courses are going good, and we are still offering Humboldt Senior Resource Center's counseling space once a week in the office. We are starting up the ever popular SAIL program, Stay Active Independent for Life movement, balance, and fitness program. And that had a huge following pre-COVID. And we're starting that up through Area 1 Agency on Aging, T.B. Smith, and our instructor, Burl Bergelar. And it's going to be conducted hybrid in this room on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the mornings. And we have a writing group, a card making class coming up on the 26th, a flu vaccination clinic coming up on the 27th in partnership with Redwood Community Pharmacy. And we're working on a weekly drive-through meal distribution through the Humboldt Senior Resource Center as something that we can do right now until they get their grant funded out and get the truck built. If they need to bring hot food up here, and then we're going to have pop-up kitchen, you know, once or twice a week, and coordinate, and in conjunction with that, we'll be sending our seniors home with frozen meals to eat for the rest of their week or whenever they want. That's what's going on at Senior Center.
Thank you. And we had a question from the audience.
Cool. Cool.
That's a wonderful idea, and I never thought of that.
Yeah, really.
Thank you.
One thing to be careful about is the board members, elected officials have got crossed up participating on next door, so just be careful about as a board member going on there. Kind of like, well, I won't be issues, it'll be. No, I'm just saying for people that, yeah.
No.
Next Thursday, I had quite a few footballs when it comes to elected officials.
Well, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't beat Facebook.
Probably not.
And I'm pretty well versed with Facebook. Okay. Thank you. Wonderful.
I'm just saying, if board decides we're all gonna be hanging out next door.
Right, we can't have an extended meeting because we're all posting on text.
Beating the dead horse, but then I've been active, but I say it again, Scott, thank you so much. You're the right guy for the job, and you've really done a great job, and thank you. I won't say another damn good thing to you all week, though.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, Scott, thanks a
Yeah.
lot for what you're doing for the seniors. I don't feel like we should be better with them.
Yeah, I think we're going in the right direction. That meal thing, man, right on.
So next we have the Audit and Finance Committee. Recommend? I'll defer to you.
Okay, so we met, last week, at the beginning of the week, and, or sometime last week, and we reviewed the rate study, the PowerPoint presentation that you saw tonight, and we also reviewed the engineer's report for the rate study, and brought our comments back, and had a meeting with the consultants on that. And that's it.
Great. Employee negotiations, we have had any employee negotiations last month. McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee.
I attended that via Zoom, and we had California Unincorporated. Michael Siemens came and gave us a presentation related to incorporation in the pitfalls or the difficulties with that, and sort of was interested in not so much selling us on the idea of incorporation in McKinleyville, but more along the lines of coalition building for members of the community to participate in his more of his statewide California Unincorporated. I think it was the gist of what I got out of it. I might be wrong about that, but Pat was there. Pat was actually in the room. I was on Zoom and had a pretty shoddy connection. So I don't know, Pat, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think you did a good job summarizing it. We talked a little bit about the joint meeting as well, and about, Director, President Couch and Bonnie getting together to plan how we're gonna present that meeting on October 26th, and April is actively trying to schedule that. And I think that's mainly it. They also gave a going way to Chief Campbell, who is retiring. So we met his replacement as well.
Yeah, I was also there in person, and I think Director Orsini's assessment is pretty spot on. I think, yeah, I saw it as a bit more of a sales pitch than your audio going in and out was. Anytime somebody tells me they're not there to sell me something, and then they try to sell me a used car, I kind of chuckle. But it was mostly, like Director Orsini said, wanting people mostly to join his group more than anything else in mind. So, anyway.
Thank you. Let's see, Humboldt Local Agency Formation Commission, we didn't meet, but I did at the CSDA meeting. I went to a wonderful LAFCO presentation by a gentleman from Southern California, and kind of imprinted in my mind that talking about whether or not McKinleyville incorporates and how that would relate to CSD is there's lots of special districts that exist where there's a city overlay. So even if we incorporated our special district, we go on. I never realized that.
Yeah, I did realize that. And that's one of the reasons I tell our public that you'll also be paying. That's why your taxes are going to go up, because you're going to keep paying for us and all the new stuff. But you're already getting.
Yes. All right, Environment Matters Committee, you didn't read, do you have anything? Ad hoc Committee, Community Forest?
And since Leslie chaired the meeting, we'll let her go ahead and give us a breakdown of what happened.
She's not so happy about it. You kicked it to her.
No. We met twice. We met on August 3rd and we met on August 30th. What did we talk about on the 3rd? Oh, we talked about the walks that we took in July of the different sites and then talked about the request we were gonna make of Green Diamond for access points. And then we met on the 30th to review the request letter and the maps and talk about the parking lot at Murray Road. And yeah, so the letter got sent right after that meeting and now we wait.
Thank you for that. I put a completely spaced out.
Right.
Or
So,
I
so
had
good stuff.
completely spaced out.
It actually was really good, and that was a better concise way of putting it than Tyler, but we're starting to hone in on some details that are necessary, and things are moving along, and everybody seems to be cooperating, and we're happy.
But we'll wait and see what they say about that letter, whether they're cooperating.
Okay, we have legislative and regulatory reports.
Well, I brought up the two, SB 222 already, and it's a big deal, and we've all been, it's actually gonna impact us really bad. You know. So anyway, we're working on that, patch on it, like a dog on a bone, and those special districts include awful.
I have one thing too, and I wrote it down to bring it in, and I didn't bring that piece of paper. I should have wrote it in my composition book, but that ballot initiative for the modifications to Prop 218, they got enough, they received enough signatures for that modification to the 218 process, but it's not going to make the November election, so the next time it'll be able to be on the election will be the in 2 years when the presidential election is, which means there's going to be a significant turnout. You know, will be quite a turnout. It doesn't look good related to you know, a lot of the criteria for and the jargon that's used in the 218 process now is going to go away, and the level of it'll be much more it'll be much more subjective than a certain amount of pay for a certain amount of services or a certain amount of cost for a certain amount of services. Yes, it will, and it also is going to make it almost impossible to be able to justify a 5-year rate study, and also there'll be the equity. Another one of those things, equity will be in there to where people that might not be in the same financial situation as other people might be able to argue that they can't afford to pay the rates that we're paying, and we might have to have multiple rates for different.
Because see, the deal, well, you know how it works. I mean, there'll be all kinds of modifications and redos and stuff, and equity may rise to the very top of the whole process by the time it's done, and that may be one of the #1 compelling deals, which really, again, for smaller districts, especially hurts, really hurts.
And the thing about it is it's a modification to the Constitution of California, so there won't be any arguments that it's unconstitutional, or the test for it being unconstitutional will be much harder to do. And the worst part about it is that it's going to be retroactive back to January of 2022. So any rate study that's been done, any 218 process that's been done starting in January of this year will be subject to that constitutional change. Well, this is going to be a ballot initiative. It's not even legislation.
All right, let's go to staff reports.
Nothing further to add.
Oh, see, they've already gotten to you, haven't they?
She's learned.
Oh, yeah.
I've often thought that you ought to just say, have you read the damn packet?
Well, James, you want to say it? Okay.
What's gonna make it look better?
No, I really don't have anything further to add to my report. Oh, except that Athletics, which wasn't full when I wrote this, is now full. So that's exciting.
All right, Pat.
And I unfortunately do have things to add. Did want to tell the board that our solar array is up and running and we're spinning the meter backwards. So we're saving money every day now.
All right, now we're not spinning the meter backwards, are we?
Well, not this instant because it's dark outside, but
As soon as we get our
Earlier
damn
today,
batteries online, we will be. As soon as our batteries are online, we will be.
and that kind of leads into the next thing I want to let the board know about. CSDA is doing legislative tours. They've selected McKinleyville. They're going to be here on October 4th at 9 a.m. We're going to meet out at the wastewater treatment plant and do a tour of the microgrid. So again, that's October 4th at 9 a.m. for anyone who's available to go.
October 4th at 9?
Yes, they've said there's going to be 12 additional people other than whoever we bring, but I don't know who those people are yet. If I do find out, I'll let you know.
Right, but Pat, you're gonna reach out to some of our folks that we previously asked to come and give them a special invitation.
Director Mayo, I can't hear anything you're saying if you're asking
All
me a
right,
question.
I'll talk to you when you get back with just,
Okay.
Yeah, about contacting people, that's all.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. Also want to remind the board that our October board meeting is going to start at 6 p.m. And the first agenda item is going to be talking with the new 4th District Supervisor, Natalie Arroyo. So we have decided we are going to change that to a 6 p.m. start time. And then we're just going to go straight into the rest of our board meeting after we're done talking with Natalie. And I already mentioned the October 26th joint MCSD MCMAC meeting, reminding everybody about that. And also reminding everybody to let April know if they want to go to the Aqua Conference. That's it for me.
Pat, while you're there,
Yep.
I wanted to offer you and your family our deepest condolences, and we hope you guys are doing well.
Thanks much, Dennis. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, same echo from me. Please pass along my sympathies and condolences to your family. And while you're there, don't fall off the damn roof because you'd be pretty hard to replace right now.
I'll try not to. But thank you all.
Thank you, Pat. Well, let's see, President's report. I don't have much of a President's report. The conference I went to, I also went to an interesting presentation on dealing with homelessness. So I've had some ideas for us for the future. And that's about it for President's report. Do we have any board member comments, announcements, reports, agenda items? No, we done? Yep.
Supervisor Madrone.
Madrone, okay. Thank you. Go ahead. Director Madrone. Supervisor Madrone, excuse me. Steve, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, President Couch. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, great meeting, and I just want to commend the board for all its hard work for the community. You guys are the essence of providing all the important services really in the community, and I very much appreciate the work you're doing to cooperate and work with the MCMAC. Together, you guys make a wonderful team in McKinleyville. Also, congratulations on that incredible project you're doing, the vision that Greg Rossini talked about earlier, working with CalTrout, and of course, Mary Burke. She is a force to be reckoned with in terms of getting things done. Amazing effort out there, and just many kudos for that. And I will be there for you however you want my help with the election process at the board. Look forward to getting your recommendations. And yes, as I understand it, Mr. Couch and Mr. Mayo are both automatically going to be seated. But of course, you're going to confirm all that with the elections office. We did do an appointment outside of an election cycle with the Oric CSD, and it was the elections office that really helped us figure all that out. The last thing I wanted to say is that, you know, a lot of times tonight I couldn't hear a lot of you talking because you weren't speaking into the mic, and I know Pat brought that up. But if you really want engagement from the community out here in Zoom land, it's just important, if we're not in the room, to remember that we are there and we are listening. And so speaking into the mic is a great way to help us out here participate in the meeting. And I really appreciate that you continue to do these hybrid meetings. So thank you for all of that. And I think that's really all I had to say. Congratulations on all your hard work.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for that critique, and Joey, we'll probably need to, is there a way that you can monitor us at all on your end over there so that we make sure that our gain's right, or? Yeah, okay, yeah, and that's a good critique, because that's very important.
I would say something heavy that you can throw. Would probably be the best way to keep us talking into a microphone.
Little buzzers, little buzzers on our seat.
Hopefully we have off and on buttons for them.
Doing like a little Madonna singing deal?
Yeah. James wants to get the Britney Spears one. Are those pink?
I can do the doo-wop rhythm, James. I just can't carry the, you know, all the. Yeah, that thing. Yeah, that thing. You know, I've been a James fan for 15 years and I still can't carry a tune.
Okay, anybody else got anything? I think we're,
Substantive, I mean, substantive.
Substantive.
Without a drummer, I would
None of it's
stand.
substantive.
oh, I think we're adjourned.